You had a happy holiday season, presents, family, food, rest, relaxation, and all that good stuff. Come Monday, it's back to reality, unfortunately. And for college basketball, the reality is that conference play is largely here for good. And boy, we have games to talk about over the coming week. Hope you got your rest in because it's basically full throttle starting tomorrow, and it probably, frankly, won't end until the Final Four in April in Tampa. So welcome to the first 2025 edition of the Gauer Hour. Rob, Joyce, Megan Gauer. We took last week off. A decent amount has happened since we've last spoken. Megan, first off, Happy New Year to you. How are the holidays?
They were good. I am still off of work, so I'm running the Monday is back to reality for me. But I've officially forgotten what day of the week it is, so I'm doing well.
Yes. What was the best present? Did you get your Nest?
Yes, I did. That is great.
Have you just been playing with it for 10 days now?
Basically, no, not really. There's not that much to play with, but yeah.
You get a frying pan?
I did get a frying pan, so
you're adulting at an elite
I know. I know.
What else? Anything else noteworthy?
I don't know. Some clothes, some jewelry, the usual stuff.
Usual stuff. All right. Fair enough. We are releasing this a little bit later than normal because OU Texas still hasn't ended. And at the time it took me to say that sentence, there was another foul called. No, I'm kidding. Megan had a work obligation. Diabolical game last night. Not even I don't even put it on the players, frankly, but 54 fouls, 55 field goals.
Yeah. Just ugly. There's no other way to put it. Ugly. Oh, that's not fun way to watch a game.
It took what, 2.5 hours? Something like that? Yeah, no. No college basketball game should ever take 2.5 hours. In terms of the non-fouling portion of the program, nice win for Texas.
Yeah. A good win for Texas. A needed win for Texas. I feel I feel like they haven't had a big one yet, so it's good to see them kind of notch that first big win. First game this season against a power conference team too that any team has won shooting only 6 threes, which is crazy.
Yeah, I have good and bad for both teams. The Texas part, obviously good. They won the game. Nice win on the road at a top 10 team. Their aggressiveness on defense and their ability to force turnovers, it's going to keep them in just about any game, no matter how they're doing offensively or on the glass. They overcame Madison Booker, only playing 18 minutes. Jordan Lee, nice surprise. I mean, she saved their bacon, frankly, going 4 for 5 from 3. The good for Oklahoma, the missing dimension from last year is there, right? Not only with Reagan Beers, but Liz Scott was really good off the bench. They're just bigger than they were. 21 offensive rebounds, plus 16 on the glass against Texas. That doesn't really happen. And then, frankly, at 2 of 16 from 3, I consider that kind of an outlier.
Right.
So I don't take a whole lot away from the loss.
Yeah, I agree from the Oklahoma standpoint. They're not going to shoot 2 of 16 from 3 often. I think you could point some to, you need to have Reagan Beers on the floor more, but, Liz Scott did a really nice job off the bench, so I'm not overly worried about that either. And, the fouls in this game were just ridiculous. So, I'm not going to say much about that being – it's kind of an anomaly. So, yeah, I'd be you didn't shoot the ball well. It happens. I don't really think any differently of Oklahoma because of it.
The bad for Oklahoma, second time this year we've seen him turn it over 27 times. Fifth time with 20 or more. I'll be nice. I'll ignore the other games where they had 17 or more. I'll just stick to the ones where they turned it over 20 times. Am I crazy? There are more turnover happy teams this year at the top, I feel than there have been in recent years. There's always more turnovers in women's basketball. Boy, this year it's bad. I have numbers to back it up. Boy, it's even the eye test. It's bad.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of turnovers in Oklahoma, in particular, in their 2 big games now. Really have fallen to that with Duke and now Texas as well.
We'll play a game. How many? There are 353 Division I basketball teams. How many average? We'll start with 16 turnovers a game. Out of 353 teams, how many of those average 16 or more turnovers a game?
300, probably most.
Okay, it's not that bad. It's 211, which is really bad. 60% of the country turns it over 16 or more times. How many turn it over 18 times a game or more?
150.
Boy, even I'm the pessimist here, Megan. It's 103. 103. But still, that's just it's bad. Oklahoma, not the only team in the country that has turnover problems. And also, this might be unfair, but if Oklahoma really needs to hold down a good team to 70 or 75. I don't know if I trust them to do it. They did against Michigan, so it's probably a not fair assumption going back to last year. But I just have that in the back of my head of if they really, like, if they shoot 2 of 16 from 3, can they get enough stops? And my hunch is no. I think that I'm just overreacting a little.
Yeah, I think it's a fair reaction. I just think, like, they're not going to shoot 2 of 16 from 3 very often, so I think maybe you take that as it comes, but I do think this is a team to beat a team like Texas, to beat a top 10 team. They can't shoot 2 of 16 from 3.
Right, which you could say that about a lot of teams.
Right.
Texas, one of those
can't beat a top 10 team.
Right, Texas. You can't say that about Texas. Like my bad takeaway from Texas last night is like Jordan Lee going 4 for 5 from 3. She did it against JMU. Otherwise, like everyone else was 0 of 1. It's 2025. Like generally speaking, you're not winning 6 games in March if you not even don't make threes. Like you steadfastly refuse to shoot them. Like you don't have to be Tennessee, but like they're not so much bigger and better than everyone that when you go up against Oklahoma or let alone South Carolina's now in your conference, LSU is in your conference. Like you can't just beat teams into submission. You can, 35 times a year, 34 times a year. If you're trying to win a national championship, I think I just need to see them shoot threes. But again, they won on the road against a top 10 team that they lost to twice last year. So maybe I should just save this for another time.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, though. I think it's going to be hard to, when you think, like, this is like, right, we're talking about, like, how does this team get to a Final Four? How does this team win a national championship? And, like, I think that has to be a piece of it because, like you said, they're not that much. It's not like the South Carolina teams a couple of years ago that didn't shoot any threes, but, like, you had Aaliyah Boston and Kamala Cardoso, and, like, you were just so much bigger and stronger than everyone else inside. This team is good inside, but, like, when they meet a match of a team that can match that length and match that strength inside, when the defense can just collapse inside, they're going to have problems.
Right. That South Carolina team 2 years ago lost in the national semifinals because they just had a strangely bad game in the paint. And the team won the national title 3 years ago because in the first half against UConn, Zaya Cook and Destiny Henderson came out and made like 4 threes in the first quarter. And then you just put teams on your heels. So there just has to be some sort of marginal consistency. That's my one bugaboo with Texas. But again, probably the wrong time because, again, you just beat a rival that you didn't beat at all last year. And they're still, they're a top 5 team and vibes are high going into SEC play. Other Thursday happenings, Clemson by 11 over Cal. I was going to talk about Cal in a positive light, and then that's not a great loss. Clemson's improving under Sean Poppy, but they're still not a very good team. Tanai Latson, 40 points against Virginia Tech. Would you have guessed that's a program record, given how good Tanai Latson is at scoring?
No, to be honest, I would have assumed that she scored 40 points at some point already.
Yeah. Other things that we missed while we were away last weekend, Michigan, with the new Big Ten, like you have to schedule it this way, playing USC and UCLA consecutively. That's brutal. Michigan was the first victim of it. Silas Swords didn't play against the Trojans. She returned and dropped 30 against UCLA. Neither game was in doubt, though, in the fourth quarter. I said this last time. Michigan's, I think, is just a year away. Yeah. Like they're Michigan State last year. They're in all these games against USC, UCLA, South Carolina. They played someone else, Oklahoma. They're just not quite good enough to get over the hump. That feels like an 8-9 seed that you probably don't want to see in the second round.
Yeah, and like South Swords is so good, but they're a little bit of experience and behind everyone else. And like you said, next year they're going to be right up there. But I think we're going to see them hang around in these big games, and they'll probably get 1 or 2, but I just don't see them beating like the USC's, UCLA's.
USC wins over Nebraska by 20. They pulled away on Sunday. I forgot Natalie Potts tore her ACL last month, so that really puts a damper on the Huskers, who otherwise are good. Beat Michigan by 20. They pulled away. At UConn, it was a long time ago now, but we haven't spoken since. Give me your 30-second overview of UConn USC.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the tale of 2 halves. USC goes up big in the first half. UConn looked awful in that first half. UConn comes out in the second half with an entirely different team that like closes an 18-point gap and 12-ish minutes or so, and then USC kind of was able to pull it out at the end.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, from like a USC perspective, I think it was a needed win. I feel like they haven't gotten a big one yet. They lost that Notre Dame game. I think it was probably a good confidence boost for them to go to UConn, and like I think we saw strides forward in that team compared to where they were in that Notre Dame game. I mean, I think Juju's playing a lot better than she was at the beginning of the season, and it's just so critical for this team that she is at that high level that we saw against UConn.
Yeah, that was going to be my big takeaway from USC, not just the UConn game, but Michigan and Nebraska. And frankly, since Notre Dame, like where she's needed to improve, she has.
Right.
I ran through the stretch March of last year, so basically the postseason, Pac-12 tournament and the Elite Eight run. Didn't have a game above 50% shooting. She was sub 30% from three, a lot of turnovers. In the 10 games since the Notre Dame loss, 4 games above 50% shooting, just 2 below 40. She's been better from three. 9 of 11 versus Cal Baptist kind of pushes that up a bit. She's still not great, but better. And most importantly, 9 straight games, 3 or fewer turnovers.
Yep.
That's a recipe that's just hard for teams to beat USC when she's playing like that.
Yeah, agreed. I think that we're starting to see the USC team that people thought we were going to see. And it just took a little bit, which makes sense. They're young, a lot of new pieces. It makes a lot of sense that it took a little bit.
It's almost like we shouldn't judge teams in November.
Exactly.
UConn, I will say, showed fight. I think it might this might be a turning point. You remember the men's game 2 years ago against Xavier where they couldn't beat anybody in January and they were down by like 20 and they didn't win. Yeah. But you felt like a turning point. I wonder if this is the same for the women's team.
Yeah, I feel like the second half for UConn, I feel like if had the game gone like the first half went, we would have been having a very different conversation about UConn.
I had UConn 5.5 feet under. I was ready. I was ready.
It was bad. And then they came out in the third quarter and went down even more, and you're like, oh God. But yeah, they clearly showed that there's something in there where they can play like one of the best teams in the country in that second half. Like it's not nothing to erase an 18-point deficit against a team of USC's caliber. So I think that's very positive. I still feel like there's something missing in terms of them like getting that consistently. Do you feel like they're getting somewhere with this smaller lineup and kind of playing Sarah Strong at the 5 and getting more scoring by having less of their bigs out there? And I mean, that probably works against 95% of teams in the country this year, so I don't think it's a bad plan. But it still feels like they're missing something, and I think it's probably just that consistent third option. And I think you're seeing people find their roles. Like KK Arnold has been so good for them defensively these last few games, but like they need that third consistent scoring option, I think, to really cross that mark.
So we're getting our UConn talking now because we're not going to talk about them much the rest of the year. Their 1-seed hopes are probably gone, right? Unless they go 2-0.
Yeah, if you go
Tennessee and South Carolina.
South Carolina, maybe we get to have that conversation, but I don't even know that that's going to be enough, just given all the opportunities these other teams are going to have in conference play.
They have 2 surefire quad 1 games, Tennessee and South Carolina.
Yeah.
Creighton, depending on how the Blue Jays do, might be, especially the one on the road.
The one on the road, I would expect to be. The one at home, we'll see. Probably not.
The point here is they have like 3 games that will matter between now and probably the round of 32. So we won't know how UConn responds. Like whether they beat USC or lost to USC, I expected them to beat the brains off of Providence and whoever Marquette.
Yeah.
So we're just not going to know. So that concludes the UConn talk until probably the Tennessee game, because they're just going to beat up on bad Big East teams, and we won't know what it means until Lady Vols left town. Other takeaways while we were gone, Sunday, team we haven't talked about much because they haven't played anybody. Let's talk about Maryland. Beat Michigan State, and now they have a couple of nice wins under their belt against, and otherwise they're still undefeated. A lot of bye games, but nice win over the Spartans.
Yeah, this is definitely a good win for Maryland. I still don't know what to make of this team, and I think it's what's holding me back is like the number 8 next to their name. Like, I don't think we've seen enough to have any clue if this is actually a top 10 team or not, because they just haven't played anyone that's in that kind of top stratosphere. And we're going to get there, right? Like, Big Ten play is coming. They're going to play people. But, like, the team that Maryland has, I still don't know what to make of this team, and I think it's what's holding me back is like the number 8 next to their name. Like, I don't think we've seen enough to have any clue if this is actually a top 10 team or not, because they just haven't played anyone that's in that kind of top stratosphere. And we're going to get there, right? Like, Big Ten play is coming. They're going to play people. But I mean, to start like this with especially like a very new group of players in terms of a lot of transfers, and to be a Michigan State team that has proven that they're pretty darn good, I think is a great win for Maryland.
This was a lot like the Duke game. Like Terps opened up a big lead, led by 9 after the first quarter, led by 11 at halftime. Michigan State was never out of it, but it never really seemed like the outcome was in doubt, which is basically how the Duke game went. We haven't talked about them because since the Duke game until the Michigan State game, at Syracuse, bad team. Towson, St. Francis of Pennsylvania. George Mason might be their best win outside of the Duke and Michigan State ones. Toledo, Mount St. Mary's, Purdue, not very good. William and Mary, just hadn't played anyone. But now that they have a couple of nice wins, I'm confident in saying Reagan Beers is probably the best transfer so far in the country. Kayleen Schmeichel can't be far behind. She's been really, really good the whole year.
Yeah, I would agree. And this is probably the best collection of transfers that anyone's put together, I think. This is a far cry from a Maryland team last year that I think at this time we were like, are they even going to make the tournament? They did, but like that was the conversation we were having about Maryland at this time last year.
Yes, Michael's improved across the board from Rutgers. She's much more efficient scorer, over 50%, 44% from three-point range. Her usage rate, top 10 percentile in the country. It takes a lot of pressure off Cheyenne Sellers, who's shooting the ball better, not as much, fewer turnovers. And you're right, Sailor Poffenbarger. I don't understand her, and this is a good a compliment. Like she's 6'2", she's long, but she's not like an overly big frame. She just gets after the ball.
Mm-hmm.
She's one of the best rebounders in the country. And offensively, she kind of like her frame is, probably like a stretch four. That's kind of what she does offensively, but defensively, boy, she bangs bodies down low and gets the ball. Very impressed.
Yeah, I mean, between her and then Christina Dulce as well, like the rebounding on this team from players that are not necessarily, like you said, like so big in frame, but are tall and have the length is really impressive.
They still do turn it over a lot. I'm curious what some numbers look like as they get into Big Ten play. Like, are they the second best rebounding team percentage-wise in the country? They're probably top 10. I don't know if they're the second best, but they're gonna, juice the stats against a lot of nobodies. But they're a lot closer to the top of the Big Ten than they are to like the fifth or sixth best team. I'm confident in saying that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I don't take a ton from the loss from Michigan State, who they're not the most talented team. They annoy you for 40 minutes. They get a ton of turnovers. They're not the best shooting or rebounding team in the world, but they're good enough that on the right night, they're going to get someone above their weight class. It just wasn't Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a close loss on the road for Michigan State, 6 points. Like, I don't worry too much about that for them.
If you want me to pick a team in like the 17 to 25 range, so basically like a 5 seed or a 6 seed that might surprise someone in March, Michigan State might be my pick. They're just hard to play against.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at like that range of teams, like if I would open up the AP top 25 right now, like I think that's definitely the one that jumps out to me.
Alabama, another team. How about shout out to the Crimson Tide while we're on the topic? They beat the Spartans by 15 in Palm Beach. They beat Richmond. And Alabama suddenly making a lot of noise after in the preseason. I wondered, like there was a lot of pressure on these non-conference games because they didn't have many good ones. They've passed every test thus far, and they have Texas in 6 days. So we'll see how good they really, really are.
Yeah, I think a great run for them in that little weird December MT.
Whatever the MT was called.
Yeah. But no, they put a lot of pressure on themselves in those games, but they delivered, so it worked out.
Spiders at large hopes. Bye-bye. 0-2.
Yeah, probably, though that Oklahoma State one they have is starting to look a little better, so you never know.
That's true.
But yeah.
Yeah, while we were gone, again, like nobody played the week of Christmas at all. Last week, there weren't a ton. I wrote down 10 like marquee type games that we're going to preview over the next handful of minutes. Before we get there, though, January conference play is here. We're not going to go conference by conference and break down. Like I think at this point, we all know who's the favorite in your league of choice. But I gave Megan some homework. I did it too. Some superlatives as we head into conference play. SEC is fill in the blank. Big Ten is fill in the blank. ACC fill in the blank. Big 12 fill in the blank. So Megan, wherever you want to start, pick your conference of choice.
Let's start with the SEC because, in my opinion, this is what I wrote down in our list of superlatives here. It's the must-watch league because I think this is probably the most interesting league in the country, in my opinion. In terms of like this, what you have at top, but also the kind of the middle tier is also very good. I'm most excited to watch the SEC.
Yeah, I call the SEC the best top-heavy conference. South Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma, LSU, Tennessee. I don't think any other conference has 5 teams that boast like realistic Final Four hopes. Kentucky, Alabama, Vandy, Ole Miss are good. After that, it largely falls off a cliff. But that top 5 is just hard to top.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely a cliff that happens after kind of that next group. But that top 5, and I think that's a strong middle group as well. Like I think those are teams that are going to, at points in the season, knock off people in that top 5 as well. So I think this one is going to be probably the most interesting conference race. Like, obviously, I'm excited for like LSU, South Carolina, and South Carolina, Texas. Like, those are going to be huge, huge games. But I just, in general, think amongst that top group plus the next kind of tier, like all of those games are going to be much watched basketball.
I will say we've bemoaned conference realignment a lot, and for a lot of positive reasons or a lot of negative reasons, but I think that we're accurate. One of the positives coming out of it is every week there's some sort of good game, generally multiple good games, because you see Texas is going to play South Carolina now, and where before they were going to play a Big 12 team that probably isn't as good as South Carolina. You see UCLA and USC, like USC and Maryland is next week. You just didn't have that before. What's next on your? We have 3 more conferences. Where are you going?
I will say, like, I feel like when you look at the SEC, like realignment makes sense. I'm like, okay, these are still like geographical
Southern teams.
Like, yeah, like it's just like okay, and then you look at like the ACC, and like yesterday, like it was like Stanford versus SMU, and that's an ACC game, and I was just like, this doesn't make any sense.
Right, Cal lost to Clemson.
Right.
Oh, that's a conference game. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. What's next? ACC, Big 10, Big 12.
Let's do ACC, which I didn't write anything on because I think you pretty much covered it. Like, I just don't know what to make of this league.
Yeah, I gave it the biggest question mark. Obviously, Notre Dame is the top team in the conference.
Right.
Beyond that, like Georgia Tech is still unbeaten. They're up to 13th in the nation. Can you name the unbeaten teams? There are 7 of them.
Georgia Tech, UCLA, Maryland.
Yes.
I feel like LSU. That was an obvious one.
Missing 3. If you get one of them, I will fall out of my chair.
Oh, I looked at one earlier. Ohio State.
Yes.
And then I don't know the other 2.
Tennessee.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
I feel like I missed someone. And then, did you say LSU? You said LSU.
Yeah.
Buffalo.
I would not have picked that one.
Go Bulls.
Cool.
But anyways, yeah, so Georgia Tech is unbeaten. They're 13th in the nation. They beat Nebraska by 11 since we last spoke. They should be 17-0 when they head to South Bend in 2 weeks. I still have question marks for a team that's not normally in this situation. I don't know if North Carolina can score enough. NC State is still ranked. They're probably better than I give them credit for with the talent that they have in the backcourt. Duke put up 56 points in a loss at South Florida. That looked like the Duke team that I thought might show up in the preseason. Yeah. First time we saw it. They're still a good team, but they have that type of performance in it. Cal was sitting there at 13-1, just lost to Clemson. FSU can get someone on the right night. They could also lose to anyone on the right night. I'll throw in Louisville. They probably shouldn't be in this list, but like Louisville has talent. None of it's proven out of any of these teams.
Yeah. I think if you ask me who's going to finish second, I can tell you who's going to finish first in the ACC, and it's going to be Notre Dame. If you ask me who's going to finish second, I have no idea.
Yeah. I will say for Cal, I did the research before they lost, so I might as well say it. Their win against Alabama is aging wonderfully, but a lot of these nice wins that Cal's had have really aged poorly. Not their fault. Like they had a 21-point win over Gonzaga. Bulldogs are bad.
Yeah.
They are below 500. 20-point win over Stanford. Cardinal have not looked good.
Like did they lose to SMU yesterday? They were down the last time I looked in the.
I didn't even look.
Attention to
it. Did they? Well, we hyped up Stanford a lot in the first couple of weeks because they looked good against Gonzaga and wiped the floor with them. Yeah. Turns out that was an overreaction because
they did lose to SMU.
They just lost to SMU. Even worse. So that aged poorly. Auburn just lost at home to Norfolk State. Arizona, who they beat, both losses to Northern Arizona. Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon's pretty good. I'll give them a shout out. Last time lost by 21 to Utah. So, like, on paper, you think, oh, they beat Gonzaga, they beat Stanford, they beat Auburn, they beat Arizona.
Yeah. Those are not what you would expect.
No, and that's not Cal's fault.
Yeah, no, it's not Cal's fault.
But, like, this could be a 13-2 team with a lot of great wins if things broke differently. Instead, they're a 13-2 team that is mid-30s, probably flirting with 40 after last night's loss in the net. Yeah. So they still have work to do. But otherwise, like, you know, I'm trying to compliment them here. Just it's not their fault that the teams they've beaten have not helped them. So that's the ACC. Big 10 and Big 12. Where are we going?
Let's do Big 10 because I feel like the Big 12 is the least interesting. I think Big 10, like at the top beyond USC and UCLA, has the most teams with something to prove. We just talked about Maryland, like a nice win over Michigan State, but we haven't seen them play anyone in that kind of top tier yet. We've got we just talked about Ohio State undefeated, but like who has Ohio State and beaten? Like I think we've got teams that are in your top 10 right now that have got some stuff to prove in the Big 10.
I just gave the Big 10 the superlative of they're the deepest conference.
Yeah.
UCLA, USC, Maryland, and Ohio State are all levels of very good to elite. SEC, I think, like if those four play the top 5 in the SEC, I think the SEC comes out on top, not by much, but then you just have a middle class. Michigan, Michigan State, Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, Oregon, Washington. I'll throw Indiana in there. Minnesota's 14-1. They haven't played anybody, but they're 14-1. Like that's just, it's a lot of teams that you have to run through night after night after night after night. There aren't many bottom feeders.
Yeah, agreed.
Shout out to the Huskies. UW. I didn't expect to put them on this list. They knocked off Illinois and Champaign. The Illini didn't have Myra Cook, but still, nice win. They're 11-4. Lost to LSU at the buzzer. Hung in with UCLA. Hung in with Utah. Bad loss to Montana, but they have a stud freshman, Savia Sellers. They have a good sophomore, El Ladine. 51st in the net, so work to do, but Washington's not a pushover. And then that leaves the Big 12. What do you got for the Big 12? Doesn't sound like it's a good one based on...
No. That's probably the power league here that is the most likely to not put anyone in the second weekend. Obviously, that's a little bit of a hot take. I think people would probably put Kansas State and TCU as possible second weekend teams, but this league just doesn't do much for me this year.
I think TCU is legit.
Yeah.
K-State, I'm not wholly sold on. They needed to pull away in the fourth from Houston, who's bad. They lost by 11 to Duke. That's their only top 50 opponent they've played. 40 opponent? I don't know the exact metric, but they haven't played many good teams. Otherwise, their best wins are Belmont and Creighton, who are fine. Belmont's a good mid-major. Creighton's a fine, bubbly team. I just need to see more. But you're right. The rest of the Big 12 is largely disappointing. Yeah. West Virginia lost at Colorado, who's better than I gave credit to. Colorado has impressed me the last couple of weeks, but they're still not much to write home about. Iowa State and Baylor. Frauds. Capital F. Baylor has played 3 teams with a pulse, and they are 0-3.
Yeah.
Including, they lost by 23 at home to Oklahoma State. Yeah. Cowgirls aren't frauds. I'll give some love to Oklahoma State. Yeah. They might be the second or best, third best team in this league. Am I crazy?
No, I agree at this point based on at least what they've actually done. Yeah, for sure.
Beat Iowa State, hammered Baylor. Their only losses to Richmond by 4. You know, we're not going to disrespect the Spiders like that.
Exactly.
That's a good loss. Yeah, otherwise, Big 12. If you told me they had one second weekend team, I'd believe you.
Yeah. I'm like, I worry for them, and like, you're also not going to play anyone that like these teams when they get to like the tournament setting, like they're probably even like a TCU and a K-State, like are probably like 4 seeds. My guess is based on like what they're gonna. Obviously, it's like very hard to predict what they're gonna be right now, but like they end on that 4 line. If you like a 4-5 game to get to the second weekend against someone that's played in the SEC or the Big 10, like give me the SEC or the Big 10 team.
Right, especially if you're the 5 seed in that and you're playing on a home or you're playing a true road game.
Right.
Do you know how many Big 12 teams are? Oh, it's more than I thought. Are top. Wow. A lot of the Big 12 is still top 30 in the net. That surprised me.
I feel like that will change.
Baylor's 23, Oklahoma State's 26, Utah 27, West Virginia's still 14. TCU and K-State are top 10. Kansas State's net is 6. Do you know where Iowa State resides in the net currently?
Oof. 40.
Ooh, starts with a 5.
Oof, that's
50.
Yeah, we're gonna have to start talking about does Iowa State make the tournament if that is the case.
Boy, we hit this in our first or second show of which top 25 team might miss the tournament because it happens every year. It's not too often top 10 teams in the preseason miss the tournament. Iowa State's flirting with it. All right, those are our superlatives. That's your overall conference reset as we head into league play. It's largely league play the rest of the year. We have some outliers. UConn, we mentioned, plays Tennessee, South Carolina. There might be a few others, but here on out, it's league play. It starts tomorrow. UCLA's at Indiana. I expect the Bruins to win, but there's a reason to think that the Hoosiers, I think, can hang around.
Yeah, I feel like Indiana has been better since that skid at the start of the season. So they shoot the ball well. I think they can hang around. I don't think they have any answer for Lauren Betts inside, though.
No, they have looked better since they scored 39 in the Bahamas against North Carolina. They haven't played the greatest of teams. Biggest thing, one of the keys for me, this is a 9 a.m. body clock game for the Bruins. This is noon Eastern on Saturday. That's just early. We haven't talked about the Bruins much because the schedule since South Carolina hasn't been great. They just keep rolling along.
Yeah, they buried Creighton right before the holidays.
Yep.
They beat Michigan, so still undefeated. I'm excited for them to get into conference play because I feel like there was so much hype around them after that South Carolina game, but then like you said, they haven't really played anyone, so like we haven't been talking about them. And I think that's just across the country. Like they haven't been the topic of conversation because they haven't played anyone. But
yeah, nice
that's
38-point win over Nebraska. That was a nice performance. Kiki Rice, I think. She's starting to look like Kiki Rice. Yeah. Which, remember, she was hurt to start the year, which kind of just went overlooked because, again, outside of she was there for the South Carolina game, and they haven't had those marquee games otherwise. Little slow out of the gates, but her last 3, 18 points a game, 22 of 29 shooting. She's dishing the ball. Bruins have 8 players averaging 7.5 or more points a game. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, they're a deep team. They've got a lot of good pieces.
Yeah, so they're at Indiana on Saturday. That's really the only notable game tomorrow, unless we get an upset. Sunday, loaded. We'll start with which one do you want to start with? We'll start with Tennessee, Oklahoma. I'll answer my own question. Because if you like points, and we hope you do, there's going to be a lot of points on Sunday in Knoxville.
There should be a lot of threes in this game. It shouldn't be very different than Oklahoma, Texas in terms of the shooting. So I am excited for that. Like this is going to be a high-scoring game. It should be interesting. I feel like this one's kind of fun because it's like not at all what you imagine an SEC game to be, but that makes it fun.
No, the SEC the last 10 years, South Carolina with entered all-world forward here that just bangs bodies. LSU, similar. Ole Miss grinds you out. Like all these teams this is a 180 to that. Like Texas fits into that mold perfectly. Mississippi State, when they had it rolling with Vic Schaefer, all fit into that mold. This is like the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Some keys for me. Tennessee's the best offensive rebounding team in the country. Oklahoma isn't far behind. You saw them have 21 last night against Texas. Tennessee's not great at preventing offensive rebounds, though. So I think second chance points matter here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then I think also taking care of the ball as well. I think these are two teams that we've seen struggle with that. I think back to that Iowa game for Tennessee where they turned over the ball a whole lot. And then, or was that Iowa? Maybe I'm mixing things up in my head.
No, I mean, Tennessee turns it over, not terrible amount. But yes, that was Iowa who turned it over every third possession.
Okay.
But yeah,
but so they've had some big turnover games as well. So I do think that's important. They just had 20 against Texas A&M this week. So I do think, for both teams, taking care of the ball is important.
That was my second key. Yeah, Tennessee forces 28 a game. They average half that. OU averages 17 turnovers, but they have a 27 turnover performance in them twice, apparently. If the Sooners rebound, they protect the ball, they probably win. Lady Vols start generating turnovers, get some dirty buckets. I think they win. I think it's, if you're looking for keep it simple, stupid, I think it's that.
Yeah.
Big Ten, on Sunday. The highlight is Iowa, Maryland. Maryland's the big 2 games coming up. To this point, Maryland's 2 biggest games have been at home, Duke and Michigan State. This is different. Sellout at Carver Hawkeye. I'm fascinated to see how they handle it because it's going to be rowdy.
Yeah, I think this will be a good test for them to go on the road and have to play in that environment. I think Maryland's probably the better team here, but it's a hard place to play. So I'm interested to see how this team handles that, especially like we said, like this is an experienced group, so like even though they're new to Maryland, like they're not new to having to play in that type of environment. I think kind of everyone on that team has done that in the past, but I still think it's a good test for them.
The last 2 times we've seen Iowa play good teams, I no longer consider Iowa State a good team, so that doesn't count.
Yeah.
They turned it over 53 times against Tennessee and Michigan State. That's the only thing preventing them from being 14-0 because they were in both of those games. They had a chance to win at the gun against the Spartans, and they were in it until the last 90 seconds against the Lady Vols. They were a top 10 team. They're still a top 10 team in their hoop stats ratings. Actually, they're favored by 10 points in that, which, take that what you will. Like, don't call it an upset if they win. You know me, I'm higher on Iowa than I think most people are.
Yeah, no, I do still think they're a good team, though. And I think, like, there's not that big of a gap, in my opinion, right now, at least between Iowa and Maryland. Like, this should be a close game, especially at Iowa.
The other game Sunday, North Carolina hosts Notre Dame. I don't know if the Heels can keep the pace offensively. I think that's, again, you're looking for your basic layman's scouting report. Notre Dame scores. We know that.
Yeah.
Can North Carolina just keep up?
Yeah, I think that's the key there. I haven't watched a lot of North Carolina since that Georgia Tech game, but like they were so good defensively, and then they kind of were not good at all defensively against Georgia Tech. So can they be a little bit better? Because I think they've got to find a way to slow down Hidalgo and Miles to stay in this one.
Yeah, my fear is, like, I think they can to a degree. Like, Notre Dame averages 89 a game, but even if you hold them to 75, which is a market improvement over 89, like, can you score 75?
Right.
I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Like 70, I think if they keep them to 70, they got a shot. They're at home. They got a shot. I just don't know if they can for 4 quarters.
Right.
Nothing else Sunday. Monday and Tuesday are light. Wednesday and Thursday, just loaded. Start Wednesday. Maryland USC is the top 10 game. I think this is where travel starts to kick in for USC. They went to UConn and back. They scattered across the country for the holidays, or if they didn't, well, then you're flying back to California. A couple of home games, Sunday at Rutgers into a Wednesday at Maryland. Lindsay Gottlieb, I would imagine if you asked her, she'd probably want to flip that. Like, let's fly to Maryland, and then if we don't have legs or we're tired of being at home, let's go to Rutgers. You can probably win. That's not how the schedule broke. I think that can play a factor on Wednesday.
Yeah, I do think as we like talk about the Big Ten and particularly like USC and UCLA, if they drop a couple people don't expect them to drop, like that's going to be a big story this year. I'm excited for this game though, because like we said, like Maryland, a team I think that has a little bit something to prove in terms of like where they are in the rankings respective to what we've seen them do so far. So I am excited for this one. Not even just can they win it, but do they hang around? Like how close is it? Obviously if they win it, that's huge. But does it? From an eye test perspective, like does Maryland feel like it's part of that top group?
Yeah, statistically, these two teams are remarkably similar. Like remarkably, the difference is Maryland has played Duke, Michigan State, and that's largely it. And USC has played Notre Dame and Michigan and UConn, and they played someone else too. Like they played better teams. I think how effective is USC from 3? Because that's what killed UConn. Is just the first half threes that was kind of off brand for the Trojans. Maryland's played a lot of teams that shoot a lot of threes, which is more of just a style, like a sense of your opponent's style. They're 304th nationally in 3-point rate, so the percentage of shots opponents take that are from 3. That's not necessarily their defense. That's just the teams they play shoot a lot of threes.
Right.
They defend it well, but if USC can, you don't need to make a billion. They made 8 or 9 against UConn? Like that's enough. And then I think how well does Maryland crash the glass? They're a good rebounding team. Can they get second chance points? End of the day, I'll give the edge to the Trojans because you have the best player on the floor. And when you're close, that matters.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Big one. We just hammered the Big 12. I think it's a big game Wednesday in the Big 12. K-State and Utah. Maybe the most telling game of the whole week. What any thoughts on Wildcats and the Utes?
I don't know if I would pick this the most telling game of the week. I think the one before it might be, but
I mean, is it though? Because sure, if one team blows out the other, we'll take away. But like, if USC or Maryland wins by like 3 points, like both those teams are good.
Yeah,
I know that. I don't know anything about Utah or Kansas State against improved opposition.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And like Utah, like they beat Notre Dame, which feels more like a fluke than how good they are, but you never know. So I am interested to see, like, do they hang around with a team like Kansas State or not? But they still have those bad losses to Mississippi State and Northwestern as well. I mean, Mississippi State's not really a bad loss. Northwestern is a bad loss. I mean, this won't be interesting. Kansas State. Yeah, I'm just interested to see Kansas State play some like decent teams and see what happens.
I'm impressed by Utah. Okay. They lost their head coach.
Yeah,
they had a brutal loss at Northwestern in like the first 2 weeks of the season. So everyone, myself included, basically disregarded them. Since like a 4-point loss to Mississippi State, that's not a bad loss. No. That's a fine loss. They beat Notre Dame. A win at Washington looks better and better. They play Iowa State on Sunday. I expect them to win. They can still score a lot of points. Like, in fact, they're scoring at a higher rate and defending at a better rate than last year without Alyssa Peely. Like, Gianna Neepkins has been really good since returning from an ACL injury. She has 50, 40, 90 splits off an ACL. That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. Like, pick a stat offensively, defensively, they're better than last year, and they can shoot the three with the best of them, which is obviously an equalizer. So I may have talked myself into Utah being maybe the second best Big 12 team. Well, I guess we'll find out. And then, K-State, if they come out with a win, I think they'll just score points in my book more than most other teams because I just need to see it. I want to see it more so than I need to see it. That being said, I'll take the Utes in this game. It's at home. What else Wednesday? They're missing the game Wednesday. Michigan, Ohio State. Wolverines got to get one of these eventually, right?
Right. Yeah, I think Michigan needs one. Ohio State, though, this is the first like big game we're really gonna see them play. So I think that's good. Rivalry game. I'm interested to see how they handle Silas Swords. I think this should be a good one too.
Did they lose at Michigan last year? That was like their only loss, and like then they ripped off that long win streak, right? Maybe I'm thinking 2 years ago.
Familiar, yeah. I don't know if it was last year or the year before.
Regardless, going to Chrysler isn't a walk in the park for the Buckeyes, who they've been businesslike, like a 25-point win over Stanford in whatever MTE it was in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Well, this isn't businesslike. This is a different environment. And if you're looking for some of the most exciting freshmen in the country, the three for Michigan, Swords, Olsen Holloway, Jelani Cambridge for Ohio State. If nothing else, you're looking at the future. Probably next year, next 2 years, next 3 years. That leads us. Go ahead.
No, I didn't really have anything to add.
Well, that brings us to Thursday, where the SEC kicks off with Tennessee and LSU. SEC is just, we're getting some bangers in the first week. Oklahoma, Texas. What are we getting Sunday? Oklahoma, Tennessee, LSU. Like, let's go.
Yeah, Tennessee, LSU should be a fun one as well. I mean, LSU, another team that, not really shockingly, but like we haven't seen them play a ton of big games yet, so I'm excited.
The MO, right?
Yeah, that's the norm. But when we get them now in SEC play, and there's gonna be plenty of big games, so I'm excited to see what this LSU team looks like against Tennessee. I feel like my concern for LSU is that like a lot of these games against lesser opponents, they've kind of, I don't know, they like come out a little flat, like they haven't, like they eventually bury them, but it takes them a minute to get there. And like, as they get into these SEC games, I think coming out that way could come back to bite them. You can actually lose the game when you do that.
You are, I think, sugarcoating it. Like you can break down the numbers all you want. It seems pretty simple. We've seen LSU sleepwalk through games. If you do it Thursday in Knoxville and you fall behind by double digits, good luck getting stops to get back in it. They trailed Murray State at the half. They trailed by 13 after a quarter. They needed a buzzer beater to beat Washington. They trailed by 13 after a quarter to Stanford. Trailed at the half at home to Albany. They were like fine against UIC and Tulane. They won all those games. Pat in the back. You're 15-0, 14-0, whatever you are. It's just a trend that you have to stop.
Yeah.
Now that you're in league play. You can do it against Murray State. Can't do it against Tennessee.
Yeah.
The statistical thing of this game, if you go on herhoopstats.com right on the homepage, a basically 50-50 split. Like they expect it to be the margin they have right now as LSU plus 0.4. Obviously not possible, but gives you the sense of very evenly matched. About as evenly matched as you're going to see in the next week.
Yeah.
Games in Knoxville. Who do you get?
I feel like Tennessee gets this one. I feel like that's probably a good thing for LSU because I think they need a wake-up call about how they need to play. Like, you can't sleepwalk and, like, you've got to get it together, and they haven't played a big game like this. So I think I'm going to give it to Tennessee, which is obviously going to be big for them to get a big win here, but I think I like the Vols.
I think if Tennessee wins, which I think they will, this would put them, I don't know, a stage that Tennessee hasn't truly felt in a while. Like, obviously, they've had South Carolina come to town. They've been a top 15, top 20 program. They've had big games in the last, basically since Pat Summitt left. I think this would start to kind of give the real sense of, like, Tennessee is back. Like, not almost back, not kind of there, like, not, we can almost beat South Carolina or LSU or these top teams, like, truly back heading into January. I know it's a January game, so don't overreact, but just the juice that Kim Caldwell has brought in 5 months, basically, if you include the preseason, is just remarkable.
Yeah, I think a hire that everyone was kind of perplexed by, but it seems to be working just fine.
Yeah. Other games Sunday will stay in the SEC. Texas, Alabama. The next step for Alabama, I know they can beat and compete with anyone in their weight class.
Right.
Can they punch up? Like, start of a brutal stretch at Texas, at Ole Miss, home to South Carolina. Can they beat Ole Miss and not necessarily win in Austin or against South Carolina? But they haven't really made these games 40-minute games historically.
Yeah.
Like last year, they were beating LSU at halftime and then just got blown away in the second half. Can they make it a 40-minute game? If they can, they're onto something here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what worries me about Alabama with these big games is their depth, because they do not play many players at all. So when you have a team like Texas or a team like South Carolina that can just go pull a handful of folks off their bench that are going to make big contributions, I think it's hard. But I agree. Can you at least make it a 40-minute game? Can you hang around? I think is the next step for Alabama.
Yeah, Bama largely runs, we'll say 7 deep, probably closer to 6 if you're in crunch time. Yeah, they have 3 starters basically averaging 30 minutes. So just, you're right. It puts a lot of pressure on Zay Green and Sarah Ashley Barker and Aaliyah Nye to show up. But that's the problem most teams have when you're playing outside of Texas, South Carolina, or UCLA. ACC on Sunday, or not Sunday, Thursday. North Carolina Duke. I think I know what North Carolina is. Very good defensive team. They have a ceiling offensively, and thus a ceiling as a team. Probably like Sweet 16's their ceiling. I've seen enough of them to feel comfortable in that assessment. I don't know where Duke's ceiling is.
Yeah, that's a very valid question. I feel like we've seen the Duke team that beats Oklahoma, which is a really great win, and then we also saw the Duke team that lost to South Florida. So I think this Duke team, from what we've seen so far, is closer to that team that beat Oklahoma. But as we get into league play, I think we'll know that more, because we're going to have to see them against kind of top competition frequently. And I think that's when you kind of really start to figure out where these teams are.
A sentence I did not expect to say at the start of the year. I'm more worried about their defense than I am their offense. Like, I think the defense has taken a step back. It's not suddenly a bad defense. It's not a giant step back, but it is a significant enough step back that I'm worried.
Yeah, I think it's just been such a big part of their identity. And, like, yes, we've seen them be able to score this year, but we've also seen nights against, like, South Florida where they just can't score the basketball. And I think that's going to happen every once in a while. And before that was maybe fine because you could defend well enough to make up for that. Obviously, we see like South Florida scoring 65 points against Duke is not the Duke team that we're accustomed to.
And then the other ACC game, that classic ACC rivalry, Cal and NC State.
God, I hate this so much.
Kind of the flip. UCLA has a 9 a.m. body clock game. This game tips at 10 Eastern in Berkeley. So that's something for NC State to deal with.
Yeah.
Can NC State take advantage? You want to talk about depth. Cal doesn't have any depth.
Right. Yeah, and it feels like NC State just like needs some of these wins. Like they've turned a corner, I think, from where they were at the beginning of the season. But now, as you're getting into league play, I think they need to pick up some of these wins to put less pressure on themselves to have to win the big games.
Yeah, I agree that they've turned a corner. I don't know if this is a must win. It'd be certainly a nice win and a boost early on in league play. Cal, they have 5 players. They're weird, Cal. They have 5 players in double figures. 2 others in the entire team average 10 or more minutes. And neither of those players averages 2 points a game. So, like, they play starters a lot, but they have, like, 6 options a little bit off the bench, but none of them score. So it's not like Kentucky thin bodies-wise, but, like, they're just super reliant on their starters. It's weird. I don't really understand it. If they feed Michelle Onya, 6'3" post player, nice opportunity for Cal. Don't turn it over 18 times like you did against Clemson. And then, 10 Eastern next Thursday. You staying up?
Probably. We'll see. And we'll see what the game looks like at halftime and if I make it to the second half.
God, it was a struggle for me last night.
Same.
Oklahoma, Texas. And that was only 9 o'clock. Do you have any New Year's resolutions? I forgot to ask you.
I've had the same New Year's resolution for like 2 years now and still fail at it. I am like not a morning person, so I'm trying to get myself to a place where I have like a morning routine that does not involve me like rolling out of bed 5 minutes before my first work meeting.
Do you drink coffee?
Yes.
Like too much coffee?
Yes.
See, I'm more of a morning person than a night person. Have a kid, you'll become a morning person. There's your resolution. Just go find a child. No, I don't drink coffee. I drink water. And for some reason, it works. Just don't text me after like 9:30 because I probably won't be awake. However, I will stay awake for, parts of Cal, NC State, and everything else next week because, boy, we just previewed all these games. We got to talk about all these games. So we have a loaded show next week coming. Maybe we'll get a guest. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. But, Megan, enjoy your weekend. We will talk next week.
You too.